And we are live. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Level Up Live. I actually wish you good afternoon. It's actually still morning for about 30 more minutes. Good morning, everyone. I'm not used to being on here in the morning, but we needed to do a schedule adjustment because I have a really fabulous guest to talk with today, and we needed to be able to accommodate her schedule. So, good morning to you. We're going to allow a few more minutes for other folks to jump on, but welcome to Level Up Live, the show where we highlight the amazing accomplishments of physician women, both inside and outside of the exam room. I am super excited for you guys to meet my guest this morning. But before we do that, I just want to remind you, if you're watching us live, please say hi in the comments. Ask your questions. We're happy to answer questions. If you're watching the replay, hashtag replay, still ask your questions because we are equally happy to answer those as well. And then I just want to give you your final, and I swear this is the final reminder for a weekend for me. You can still register today. Today is going to be the last day because they're going to give our room block away at the end of the day today. So if you have not yet registered, you're on the fence, you were thinking about it, you have questions, ask your questions, but register www.aweekendforme.com. And it is going to be amazing. November 2nd through 5th in Puerto Rico. I hope to see you there. So let's see. I'm going to introduce our fabulous guest and my friend. So we have joining us this morning Dr. Megan Melo. Dr. Megan is board certified in family medicine and obesity medicine. She's also a certified life coach through Life Coach School and certified Daring Way facilitator based on the work of Brené Brown. Dr. Melo helps women physicians and allied health professionals get unstuck from burnout by unlearning the habits of perfectionism and people pleasing and cultivating healthy boundaries and self-compassion. Welcome, Dr. Megan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and chat with you. It's always a good time when we get to spend time together. And we just got to spend last weekend together.
I know.
Not enough time hanging out.
I know. I agree. So, we were talking before we came on camera, and there's so much that we could talk about. But let's start at the beginning. Tell us about your journey through medicine. Did you always want to be a physician? Did you always know what kind of physician? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. I'm one of those who, when I was a little kid, was like, I'm going to be a doctor. And important part of my story, when you are a little girl and you tell people you want to be a doctor, often, oh, that's wonderful, that's great, right? Get a little dopamine hit, and sort of realize like, oh, that's something that wins favor with people. So we'll probably come back to that with the whole people pleasing thing.
Okay.
But yeah, I wanted to be a doctor from a really young age. My parents are both nurses, and I definitely knew I didn't want to do that. I definitely was like, no, I want to be the boss. That was my perception, right? How things went. And I'm one of those, I went, kind of straight through from college to medical school because that's all I knew, and found out later, like, oh, most of my classmates, had lived their life for a few years before going to medical school, but that's kind of how I did. And going through rotations, I always had a sense that probably family medicine would be where I'd end up. I kind of loved everything. Not eyeballs. I don't like eyeballs, but I love delivering babies. I liked being in the OR. I liked being in clinic. I liked taking care of hospital patients. And so ultimately, when I was making my final choice, it came down to, well, I don't have to leave anybody out if I do family medicine, right? I can still deliver babies. I can still see patients in the hospital. And for a while, I did that actually in primary care. So I was part of a large health system after actually both my residency training and most of my career. And I did have the opportunity to take care of patients in the hospital and deliver babies and do clinic work. Ultimately that ended up contributing, let's say, to really, multiple episodes of burnout and feeling like, I don't understand how people can just keep going with this. My pager would go, I'd have to run out of clinic and leave these patients behind to go deliver a patient, but I'd be sitting there for hours. And, it's just all this churn. which ultimately led me to deciding to leave that particular job after a lot of decision making. And ultimately, I thought I would open my own obesity medicine practice, but I decided to get coaching certification before I did that, and then sort of pivoted into physician coaching. So now I do a balance of both medicine, but at a smaller place and with a more limited scope that suits me for this phase. And then I also coach physicians on burnout and perfectionism and people pleasing, as we talked about.
Okay. So now, I was listening to what you were describing, as your day and all of the different demands and how that contributed to burnout. But what I heard in there was a lot of overwhelm. And I know that your podcast is called In Physician Overwhelm. So talk to me some about that overwhelm that you experienced and what you're seeing in your clients. But beyond that, what's at the root of the problem, and is there a way for us to fix it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that feeling of overwhelm was just, it felt like it was a place I was living. I felt constantly that there was too much to do. I was always shoulding on myself, right? Like, oh, I should do this, I shouldn't do that. Nothing I did ever felt like enough. And that's something that I absolutely see in a lot of my physician clients. And, there's this very real phenomenon in medicine where you can continue to add skills and responsibilities and such, and nothing gets taken off your plate. And often you have such a need for kind of control and a little bit of micromanagement and some hypervigilance, because you've seen bad things happen to people, even if it wasn't your fault. That everything just kind of gets tighter and tighter as you're trying to kind of hold on to things. And our brains and our bodies can only take so much.
Right.
So, during some of these episodes that I, kind of characterize as burnout, like I couldn't sleep. I was so emotionally exhausted. A little thing would make me cry, or just so physically tired. And I just couldn't at that time, see any other ways or get any other answers from people. And I remember asking colleagues, like, how on earth are we supposed to do all of this? And I just kind of get crickets back. I'd get some shrugs, of like, I don't know.
This is just the job, right?
It's just the job, right?
Buttercup.
This can't be the answer, right? But so many of the clients that I work with, have heard my story somewhere, and kind of these periods that I went through, and they're like, oh my gosh, me too. I think so many of us are walking around maybe looking totally fine on the outside, maybe being a little irritable or, just kind of curt or stressed, but inside just feeling like we're a failure, like there's something wrong with us, that we don't know how to do all of this with a smile on our face, right? That we're somehow flawed and not able to cut it when everybody else seems to be fine. Mm-hmm. And that's such a damaging internal state to be in, right? And I think that honestly contributes a lot to physician suicide, right? Because people can seem like they're okay.
Yeah.
You're very high functioning people. Right. And we can make it look like everything is okay and do all the things and get out of bed and be dressed, like brush our teeth. We can do all of those things, but inside we might be like really, truly caving in.
Yeah. You mentioned that, a couple of our colleagues have talked about this, here on this show and in other places. Dr. Jeannie Lawrence, she does coaching for for physician women who, want to feel as good on the inside as they look on the outside. And she has done some work on what depression and anxiety look like in high functioning women, because it looks very, very different than what you typically see.
Yeah.
And then also we've had Dr. Tawana Gilliard on, and she talked about her own personal struggle. She describes a night during residency where she actually sat with a gun in her lap contemplating suicide, and
Yeah.
got up the next morning and went to work like nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
And there's something very wrong with all of
Right.
it. I mean, it's like this some kind of, as my cousin would say, Jedi mind tricks happens to us as physicians, where we think that we're supposed to be able to shoulder all of this. You
Yes.
talk about feeling like you're not enough. Who
Yeah.
is enough? Who on
Right.
earth could possibly shoulder that entire burden?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's funny. I have a patient right now who's not a physician, but also, a super high achieving woman, and, has kind of become disabled by panic. Like, she's waking up in the middle of the night multiple times in panic, panic attacks throughout the day, and, is on leave. And I keep getting these papers from her insurance company, like, well, you're not describing any physical exam elements, that indicate that she's really suffering. And I'm like, yeah, because she's a high functioning woman and she's put together and you can't tell, but she's telling me
Right.
that this is going on. And I'm not going to go to her house and watch her sleep.
Right.
When a woman who's that high functioning is reaching out for help, she should have reached out for
Right.
help 6 months ago.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. So there's elements of it in physicianhood, but there's also just elements of it. I'll just, throw the gender card out there, right? Of women who are functioning at a very high level, needing to be put together in a certain way and being able to do it, but at tremendous internal cost.
Right. Right. And the other thing for me, in my work, I'm all about seizing the day and people enjoying this one life that we've been gifted.
Right.
And that's at the core of it for me, is that when you're dealing with that kind of pressure and that level of burnout, and having those thoughts that you're not enough, and
Yeah.
you're never going to be enough, you can never do enough, you can never catch up,
Yeah.
you're not enjoying your life. Like,
Not
you
at
work
all.
so hard, we work for decades to be able to put on the white coat, right, and to be the
Mhm.
boss, as you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
But at what cost?
Yeah.
That's what we laugh at the
Raise
boss,
your
right?
hand if you feel like the boss right now, as a physician.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I guess I should have done the air quotes, the boss, right? Yeah. So, we do all of this to be the boss.
Yeah.
But at what cost?
At what cost?
At what cost? We talked about physician suicide.
Mhm.
It's, I can't remember the statistic, but significantly higher than the general
400 a
population.
year, and yeah, like, we're, as women physician, I don't remember the exact number, but we're very successful
Yes.
suicide,
Yeah.
which tells me, right, that people have thought about it and they've ruled in and ruled out, kind of the permanent methods in a way that not everybody does. And that's a weird thing to talk about, but the answer is we know how to do it. And we've probably, we've taken the, the sort of, I hate to call it this, but, kind of the more gesture methods
Right.
away,
Sure.
right? And
Sure.
we've picked the more effective methods.
Right.
And that's very concerning as well, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's nothing that's not concerning about physician suicide or suicide in general, but the fact that we're more successful at it says something that's not talked about enough.
Yeah. So then how do we go about disrupting this pattern that we're
Yeah,
seeing?
yeah, yeah. I mean, the system is broken. And any part of the system, we could throw a lot of blame. We could look at a lot of different elements, but I'm not willing to wait anymore for the system to be fixed. I think it needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed by the right people. It's going to touch everyone as well, right? Not just the
Yeah.
people who work in healthcare systems, the insurance industry, but also the patients, right? Like, massive shifts need to happen. And I'm not the right person to decide what that's going to look
Sure.
like.
Sure.
So, kudos to anyone who's out there tackling that problem. But what I think needs to happen is that regardless of what happens with the system, we each of us need to really sort of reclaim ourselves,
Yes.
relearn how to take care of our physical bodies, relearn how to connect with our emotions that we've been taught to shove down, put aside, and of course, what happens beyond that, right, is we have all these emotions, right? We might be annoyed, angry, frustrated with a patient, right? We have to shove that aside. And then later we get to judge ourselves and feel guilty because I
About that.
shouldn't think that
Yeah.
about this other human because I'm this type of human, right? It's like,
Right.
no, we're just humans and we just have feelings and that's okay. But we weren't taught how to process. We were taught how to shove down. We were taught how to appear professional, but not what to do afterwards,
Right.
right? Not how to touch back, on those feelings, to allow them to understand them. In my coaching work, I talk with people about, kind of the connection between our subconscious and conscious thoughts and our feelings. So in the method I use, our thoughts create our feelings, right? But our thoughts might not be something we're aware of, right? We might look at the schedule that we have for the clinic day and, immediately feel angry.
Mm-hmm.
But we're looking at the schedule, having a thought, it shouldn't be this way. I can't believe they put Mrs. Jones next to Mrs. Smith. I can't, like, how on earth did anybody make that mistake? There's a double book. We're having all of these things, and that's creating the emotion.
Right.
Right. And so understanding that allows us to go back and see, like, what is that default way of thinking? And what changes do I want to make so that, my day goes better, right? So that I feel better.
Right.
We're not going to make it all rosy and sunny, but
Right.
just seeing how our conditioned ways of thinking are contributing to how we feel.
Right. I mean, you started off talking about how the system is broken. And so, I just want to acknowledge for everyone that we know the system is broken. So nothing that I say,
100%.
nothing that Dr. Megan says is in any way implying that you as an individual are not doing the right thing. I think it's more about tools and strategies to help you to um, be able to at least reclaim some of your life and maybe even thrive in this broken system.
Yeah.
Because there is so very much so very much that's wrong.
Yes.
But you talked about how can people feel stuck,
Yes.
and I think and that's very frustrating, and you feel powerless
Yes. You
when
feel
you're
like a victim. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that to a large extent, we have to get to a place where we're able to feel like we have more control. It's really a lot of it is about you talked about thoughts. A lot of it is about the stories that we tell ourselves, right? So
Yeah.
we tell ourselves that we're stuck, that we can't do it another way. There's no other job. There's no other this. There's no other that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, medicine cannot exist without us. And we have to be assertive enough to say, I can't take this particular
Mhm.
thing anymore.
Mhm.
I have to,
Yeah.
like you talked about your situation. You
Yeah.
were in a practice situation that was causing tremendous burnout. You couldn't take that anymore. But
Mhm.
something happened to get you to a place where you said, okay, I can't take this anymore. I need to reframe. I need to adjust my career so that I can function, so that I can find some joy and,
Yeah.
love my life, or at least like it a little bit. So how do we help other people get to that place where
Yeah.
you can start to exert some recognize first of all, I guess, recognize that you actually do have power, and second, begin to reclaim some of that power.
Yeah. I think a big component comes down to giving yourself permission to take back ownership. Um, and when I was in, kind of that before time, I was looking for other jobs for probably years, I'd scan the job boards, kind of see, well, who else was hiring, docs who did what I did. And, I just kind of come across the same kinds of jobs, right? Slight differences here and there. And I had this sense of like, yeah, that would be better for a little bit, but, kind of knew that wasn't going to be the answer. And it's not to say that we can't leave, because absolutely we can. But what has to happen first, I think, for that leave or staying to be effective is deciding, like, I have permission to make choices for myself. I have permission to leave a job or to, decide I'm going to open my own practice or, start a pot, like anything that you want to do, you need to give yourself permission for, because we've also been conditioned for external validation, right? So we needed good grades and recommendations, right, to get all the way through our training, right? And you think about both medical school, kind of the clinical years and residency, it's highly dependent on, making the mark with the people who were, supervising us, right? If none of your attendings liked you,
yeah,
you were not going to get very far, right? And so we became so conditioned looking for that external validation that we often still keep scrambling for it, and that really reinforces that people pleasing, kind of part of, like, we feel like we have to make all our patients happy. We have to be, always kind and pleasant and the easy doctor to work with, for the staff, and always accommodating and always doing everything the manager might ask us to do. And, serving all the people. And then we go home, right? And if we're, a mom, a partner, a spouse, like we've got all those things too. We want to be doing that all well, right? We have to decide, I will no longer place my worth on the good opinion of everybody else, right? I need to feel inside worthy. And I need to give myself permission to make decisions for myself without having to consult everybody and get everybody to agree and say, that's a great plan, good job.
Yeah.
But it's not what we're used to, most of us.
No, and the other thing, at least, I know in my journey, is there wasn't even, like, I didn't have time or space to have those thoughts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that stuff is not right. You don't feel like yourself, you're not happy, you're never caught up. But to be able to even sit to analyze and say, okay, these are the issues and this is how I might address them. Yeah. I didn't even feel like I had that kind of, like that kind of time or
where you're so exhausted if you didn't have something to do.
Because, on your recent podcast about loneliness, you described this woman's life and she's just going. And I kept waiting for you to say, and she went to bed and got up tomorrow and did the same thing again, because that's what it's like, right? Yeah. You just go. You go to bed, you get up, you do it all again. And when is there time to even be able to have those kinds of thoughts and these kinds of conversations? I didn't, for a long time, I'm glad I found you guys and our community, because for a long time, I didn't even have people to have the conversations with once I had the epiphany that, wait a minute, something is not right with this, but I guess, how do we help? How do we help?
Yeah. I think, so permission, learning how to sit with your thoughts and feelings, and creating space to do that, whether that involves taking some time out, whether that means, taking a big leave, of course, if you're really suffering, but even just taking, a half a day off, right? And sit with yourself and, really start to tease out, like, what is it that I actually want? Like, what needs do I have that aren't getting met, right? Because we talk about in that podcast episode that you recognize, like, we're surrounded by people all day, but we often aren't connecting really with them as humans, and so we do feel lonely. We do feel like we don't have somebody to turn to, we have to intentionally kind of seek that out.
Yeah.
So yeah, time with yourself, time with others that you can really resonate with and be human with, right? You don't have to be Dr. So-and-so with. It's so important. And unfortunately, no one does it for us.
Right.
Right. We have to decide, like I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna take some time for myself. I'm gonna spend some time with people who really see me.
Mm-hmm.
I can really be myself with, and that starts to, help us to be feeling better. It's not the only things, right? But it starts us to feel more human.
Right, right. And I think, and also finding a community. I
Mhm.
talked about finding a community, because
Absolutely.
sometimes, if you're all alone and again, we have these thoughts that are just thoughts, but we see other people and everybody looks good, but
Mhm.
you look good
All
too,
the time.
right? Everybody looks good. You look good
They're
too.
probably happy.
Right. They're probably having the same existential crisis that you are, but nobody's talking about it.
No.
But finding a community where you guys can be your authentic selves and have these kinds of conversations and come up with a solution. And what I always say is there's no one size fits all. It's
Yeah.
the solution that works for you.
Mhm.
I mean, you still have a practice,
I
in
do.
addition to the coaching, but you just made the practice what you needed it to be for your life, as
Yeah.
opposed to letting the practice of medicine dictate
Yeah.
your existence, because that's
And
what
and
ends up
even
happening.
with that, right? Like I still wrestle with things at times, I still have to remind myself that's not how I do things anymore.
Hmm.
Um, for example, I'll have a patient with some weird labs and like I know more needs to be done. It's easier for me now to decide, but I still have to remind myself, this evaluation is actually going to be more effective if I connect them with someone
Yeah.
who is more expert in this, because I can figure it out, but I'm going to spend hours doing it. And I'm not going to be able to answer all the questions, that are going to come up. And so if I step back and sort of realize that and fight against that, I have to do everything myself,
Hmm.
then I come up with a better solution, ultimately for them and for me. And it's not to say that I like send everybody to the specialist, but
Right.
I'm just a lot more conscious that that's going to be ultimately better for them, better for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about you're doing the coaching.
Mhm.
um what kinds of results are you seeing in the women that you're working with?
I tell you, it kind of blows my mind. So a lot of the women that come to me share a very similar story to me. They're feeling like they're overwhelmed, they're exhausted, they're frustrated, they feel like they're working so hard and it never seems like enough to the other
Mhm.
people,
Yeah.
and they don't feel like they're enough on the inside. And a lot of them have tried working on like getting more effective at charting, or kind of working on those pieces of our jobs that don't light us up, right? No one gets excited about doing their notes or
Mhm.
their inbox, but we have to do it, right? But they haven't had success. And what I do is really dive into some of these thoughts and feelings and sort of, kind of, yeah, that sense of, internal worthiness. And once we get there and we start busting through some of that, some of the ways that they've been, conditioned to think and feel, amazing things happen. So I had a woman recently who was in my group program, and I don't really coach on charting. Like we talk about it, but not, like that's not my area. But once we had sort of gotten through some of her sort of limiting beliefs about what was okay and what was not okay, and that it was okay to make the patient sit there, while we're documenting, and that the note is part of the visit. She went from 90 charts open, most weeks, to closing every note as she went. And she's still doing it months later.
Right. And I mean, and what a relief to even just the mental load is that,
Right. Right.
because
Because they're open
that it's
tabs in
nagging,
our
it's
brain.
nagging in there like, oh, I got to close those charts. Oh, I got to close those
Right.
charts.
Right. And, I mean, that's just one story, but there's a lot of stories like that where we have to dive a little deeper to figure out. But once we figure out, oh, I've been thinking that I have to make everybody happy. I've been feeling like if somebody's unhappy with something I'm doing, that I have to work harder. And really, I don't control other people's emotions, right? I don't control other people's expectations. Right. I just need to do, a good job, be kind and clear and polite, like I can do all of those things, but I'm not going to overwork. And once we get through that, like people's lives just feel so much easier, right? Because they're no longer spending all that mental energy trying to fix other people's emotions.
Right. Now I have a question, because this has come up a couple of times, this whole sense of internal self-worth, that, we have a hard time feeling worthy just because we are, just because we're here, just because we exist. Yeah. How do you help people to do that, to, build that internal self-worth?
Yeah. I can't say that I have a clear and easy sort of method for that, but really sort of diving into, again, sort of these thoughts and feelings, and sort of, we find all these tender spots, like, oh, yeah, I've been feeling like I have to keep doing this, to prove that I'm worthy. And when we can do that and we can kind of sit with that for a bit, and, I can kind of validate their experience and tell them that they're not alone. Mm-hmm. That often helps us to get started with that journey of starting to feel like, I'm actually good enough right now. Like I actually have amazing skills, and I'm a wonderful person, and my worth is not dictated by what I do and all the accomplishments, right? It's intrinsic. And I can sit in that and feel that, and sort of, it sort of transforms over time.
Okay. So we're just about out of time. But tell us, if we're interested in working with you, you mentioned your podcast, talk to us about the podcast, but also if we're interested in working with you, how can we find you, and what services are available to us?
Yeah, great. Thank you for asking. So my podcast is Ending Physician Overwhelm, available on all the players. And then I do one-on-one coaching with mostly physicians, mostly women physicians, really kind of teasing through these issues. And then I have a group program that runs several times a year called Healing Perfectionism in Women Physicians. And that program is based on the work of Brené Brown. We go through her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, and really sort of tease out a lot of these elements through that work. And the next round will start up in January. So you can find all of that information on my website, which is www.healthierforgood.com. And you'll find out information about the different coaching options, podcasts, the group.
Okay. So I like to end on a variation of the same question. And I have been sitting here probably for the last 30 minutes trying to figure out what that question might be for you. But here we go. If I am a professional woman and I am looking to up-level my connections, what is the single best thing I can do?
Yeah. That is a great question. And a lot of the people I talk to don't feel like they have a lot of relationships where they can show up and be themselves. But really thinking about, where are you most yourself? That's not in the exam room, because even if you have a great time taking care of patients and that really resonates with you, that's still a professional self that is not fully you. So where is it that you feel most yourself, and who are the people who are already there? And what is your relationship with them now, and how can you help to foster a deeper relationship if there are people that you really resonate with? So for example, let's say that you are someone who, I don't know, plays recreational soccer, or you're in some kind of a group and you really enjoy it and you just feel like you can show up and be yourself, and you kind of know people there. But when we go in school, like we meet people all the time, and we make friendships, and then we're out of school and then we just don't have those
Right.
same kind of communities.
No,
So it's not
absolutely.
as natural. We have to do a little work. But I think recognizing, kind of that we want to be able to show up authentically. Where are those places already? And how can I work to, foster deeper relationships if I don't already have them?
Yeah. So we may need to be a little more proactive
Yeah.
and intentional about cultivating the relationship.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that answer. Thank you so much for sharing your gifts with the physician community, for helping us to end overwhelm and to end perfectionism and to give ourselves permission to live lives that we love. And thank you for being my friend. I appreciate it. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. I appreciate you. So
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
yeah, I don't know how it took us over a year to do this, but here we are. We made it
Here we
even on
are.
Friday morning, right? We made it work.
Yeah.
So thank you all for joining us today. If you have questions, after you think about questions later, please, put them in the chat, reach out to me, reach out to Dr. Megan. We're happy to answer them. And again, I want to remind you, today is the day, it is the final day to register for A Weekend for Me. And if you were listening to this conversation, we talked about the fact that there are often not spaces, not time to even think about the things. And this is what we do at A Weekend for Me. We actually sit down and we look at how you spend your time and what your priorities are. Because what I find is that oftentimes the way we spend our time is out of alignment with our priorities. We're still living a life that a schedule that we had 5 years ago, and our priorities have changed drastically. And so it's no wonder that old schedule, those old commitments, or those commitments that you made at a different time in your life, are now creating this discord inside, because this isn't who you are anymore. And we have to give ourselves permission to pivot and to to change and become who we were created to be, because we were never meant to be static. We were always supposed to be evolving. So if you are interested in evolving, becoming the you that you were always created to be, join us. A Weekend for Me, Puerto Rico, November 2nd through 5th, www.aweekendforme.com. You have to register by the end of the day today. Take care. I'll see you guys on Tuesday. All right. Take care, Dr. Megan. See you later.
Bye.